I write about how we can create a better future. And I'm excited to see us move toward the 20-hour work week. And I think we're already on our way to doing that.
20-hour work weeks, sign me up, baby. As a former Wall Street analyst, 60-hour work weeks was considered good. But with technology and automation, shouldn't we be working way less? But how come we feel like we're on the never-ending treadmill of Zoom calls, meetings, and Slack messages?
The software engineer is still needed to write and design, but they can automate most of it. So in that scenario, they might be able to, for example, produce a video game in a year instead of 5 to 10.
That's Elle Griffin, an entrepreneur and writer building a media cooperative system called the Elysian Press. Elle believes that not only is the 40-hour work week dead, but we've had way more leisure time than past generations. In this conversation about the future of work, we cover how independent entrepreneurs are reshaping the economic prestige of work, how fractional labor is becoming a huge part of the economy, and how more leisure drives more economic growth and also more reckless consumption. Let's jump in.
Elle, start us off with, what's your beef with the 40-hour work week?
I actually have no beef with the 40-hour work week. I think some people love the 40-hour work week, some people hate it. But, it's established as a standard during the labor movement in the early 1900s with good reason, because back then it was like a 60-hour work week. And it was actually only when businesses started being like, okay, well, our employees are run ragged here and we need to reduce the work week so they have more time for rest and leisure and can come back refreshed and working hard. And this was kind of spearheaded by Kellogg and Ford. And they started the 8-hour workday and the 5-hour work week, or 5-day work week. And we've just kind of held steady at that. But there's been an interesting advancement in this is because what used to be, I'm spending a 40-hour work week on the assembly line. Now in the service field, we're spending it on a computer. And service industry, especially in the United States, is the bulk of our work. And a lot of that work is salary work. So what I think is super interesting is a salary job just means you are responsible for a set amount of tasks to accomplish in a week. And that's based loosely around the idea that work might take you 40 hours. The interesting thing is, some people, it does not take 40 hours to get all of that work done. Some people have to work way more than 40 hours, and some people work way less than 40 hours. And I actually did an experiment and asked my subscribers, if you currently work a salary job, how much time do you spend a week? Or how many hours in a week do you spend working your salary job? Mm-hmm. And the results were kind of fascinating. 400 people responded, and 70% worked less than 40 hours, 39% worked less than 30 hours, and 14% worked less than 20 hours. So I think that's pretty amazing if you think that 40% of people are working a work week less than 30 hours. So certainly there's people came to the comments being like, what is with this survey? Like, I work 60 hours a week.
What industries do you have a stratification of general career types?
I don't. Yeah. I know it's just my subscribers who are all over, but there are a lot of tech workers. But I think that what's interesting about this is think about any company you've ever worked for. There were people who were super effective at their job and just got everything done. And they might have been working less than you thought they were. They were just so effective at it. Then there were other people that you were like, this guy's a total slacker. They're definitely not working at all. And then there might have been people that are like, I'm working so hard to make up for these slackers on the team. Like, I feel like everything's falling to me. Every team has this kind of group of people. And I even did this with my friend group, who I'm no longer working a salary job, but a lot of my friend group are, and we were talking, and they were all explaining how they work at their jobs. And a lot of them these are VPs of companies, CCOs of companies. They're towards the midpoint of their careers here. And they were like, oh, I've figured out this hack that allows me to do reports in half the time. And that's the main part of my job, is putting out these reports and these analysis. And now I have an AI that can help me do it. Or now I use these programs that help me like streamline things. And I can get all of the work done super fast. And, my
Yeah.
husband is the same way. He works in heavy industry, cement, concrete, glass, steel. But the same thing, like, he has a customer base, and he has now had those customers for 20 years, and he can work really hard for a customer for a week and work an 80-hour work week and then not really have to work at all for, like, 4 weeks, as nobody has anything that they need. But as long as he's, taking care of his best customers, then he's making his numbers and surpassing them and doing a really good job at his job while work evening out to like 20 hours a week, depending on need. So
Wow.
I think this is I think this is more common than we think.
Hey, quick time out. If you're watching this video, you're probably someone who thinks deeply and intentionally about your career, about your life, and about your relationships. But sometimes you might find yourself in a place feeling stuck, unmotivated, or just rudderless. If that's you, we have a coaching program for people looking to make a bold pivot and rediscover their aliveness. Just check out radreads.co/coaching. Now back to the video. Yes. So I'm curious because many of our listeners are, I would say they are finance, consulting, law, and then kind of high growth. I mean, traditional FANG tech and high growth tech, and then entrepreneurs.
Yeah,
I would
that's
venture to guess
different.
that if I ask my audience how many hours do they work, it's going to be like 50 to 70.
Yeah.
And
Oh
I
yeah.
wonder, is that because the counter as I'm listening to you talk, I know like I, in my mind I'm seeing a lot of like the big tech fang companies. You've read a lot of those stories about people with remote work that have two jobs, and they just like give status updates on Slack, and you're coding and no one really knows, like, does your code take 2 hours or 8 hours, or now with
Right.
Claude does it take 10 minutes? But I would say what in with our listeners and many of the people who I coach, they're like, I'm burning the candle from both ends. And the service nature of their work with combined with the always on like availability of Zoom, Slack, what have you, would make them say that they are always working. Like,
Yep.
and so I wonder, do you like, can you reconcile that, or how do you, is there a reconciliation there in your mind?
I think there's two things for the jobs that are typically overworked right now. One, law, for example, is technically more hourly or even minutely
Got it. Yep.
work because you have billable hours, and I think that that is different. Second, all of those fields can either be fragmented into consulting work, and or fractional work. And we are
Mm,
seeing an increase in this as well. So if you're a consultant if you're in finance right now and you do feel like you're burning the candle at both ends, well, there's a lot of people who have been in the exact same situation and are like, screw this. I'm going to
mm,
go
mm,
somewhere where I can work 20 hours a week instead of 40, make my same hourly rate or double my hourly rate and do incredible. I mean, we think
mm.
about people like Sahil Lavingia. He's really famous for having the no meetings, no full-time
Yeah.
employees work
He's the founder
ethos.
of Gumroad.
Gumroad, yeah.
Okay.
But his whole
And
thing
just
is
for
like he's
context for our audience, like he like bootstrapped, or like he took a lot of VC money and gave it back or something and then bootstrapped it again. Is that,
yeah, he
it's like
took
a
a lot of
lean
VC
company, right?
money. Well, yeah, then he realized he wasn't gonna make his goals, so he was like, "I'm not gonna meet my goals for my VCs. Can you, like, let me off the hook?" And then they were like, "Yes." So he was like, "Okay, I'm cutting all employees except for myself, and I'm gonna bootstrap it from here." But interestingly, what he did was he said, like, "Okay, I'm gonna hire Amazon's former VP of whatever, and but I'm only gonna hire them for 10 hours a week." And
Mm,
so he was able to hire all of this incredible talent from all these incredible companies who he would have never been able to afford if he had to pay them a salary and benefits and all this stuff. But because he was only hiring them for fractional work, he could get all this incredible talent, and that talent could get paid really well and work way less hours if they wanted
mm.
to. They could also take a 40-hour work week or a 60-hour work week if they wanted. But we are seeing more and more people opt for, okay, I'd rather do this fractionally or at a less hours in less hours.
Got it. So if you were, I think I saw this example. If the gentleman, it's Daniel Vasulo, I'm
Yeah.
mispronouncing his last name, but he worked for Sahil, and he was making $500,000, give or take, at Amazon, working 50 hours a week, and
Mhm.
he basically reduced his hours by like by 75%, and basically took
Yep.
a 75% pay cut. Is that
Yeah.
effectively?
Yes,
And so
exactly.
it strikes me that those are still like pretty outlier examples. Do you feel like that is becoming more mainstream, that like type of transaction?
I think they are outliers in the US, and the reason why is because, they're more popular in Europe, for example, where
Okay.
part-time work is more, established as a
Mm,
thing. The reason why it's not a thing in the US is because of our benefits laws, like, we establish a full-time employee as somebody who can is eligible for benefits, and so we try to make everybody a full-time employee.
mm,
Actually, recently, that's changing, and Salt Lake City is doing a pilot study where, they changed the law so that benefits are not a part of the equation, and you can now be a part-time employee and earn benefits.
mm,
So, Uber is actually doing a pilot in which drivers can get a benefits package if they're working like 20 hours a week or something. And I think that's really interesting because I think that will shift that idea of it needs to be a full-time job. What will
yeah.
make it a full-time job is whether you're earning enough money to
Mhm.
live.
And I can relate to that. As someone, I was one of those people who worked on Wall Street, and made really good salary for many, many years, and then I quit because I was like, I don't need all this money, but I still need it to work. Now
Yeah.
I had to go out and kind of recreate my own like, I did not stay with the industry. I became a writer and a coach and so on. But I completely recognize your point about healthcare, which is, we're a family of four on a high deductible plan. My wife's an artist, so we don't have access to healthcare, well, until Obamacare. And I think that our like monthly spend is like close to $2,000 a month. So that's like out of the gates. That's $24,000 post tax.
Yeah.
And I think we have like a $17,000 deductible. So we're probably adding another, we're all very healthy, but we're probably adding another $7,000 of medical expenses. So that's like $31,000 of healthcare out of the gates. It's just like, it's so broken. I mean,
Yeah.
I could afford it where I had the financial runway to cover that, but I would assume that I'm definitely an outlier. Like, most entrepreneurs are not like, I have this huge cushion, let me become an entrepreneur. It's
Right.
usually like the other way around.
I mean, and that's the big push for socialized medicine as well, right? Like, let the
Yeah.
government handle that so that my job doesn't have to,
Yeah.
for sure. But I also think your case is an interesting one because how many people do you know in your industry do that same trajectory of like, I'm going to work really hard for 10 years, make a ton of money, and then like, okay, I'm done. I'm going to do something creative now. Like,
Mhm.
I think even that trajectory is proof of the work week eroding because while you may have been working for a short time, a lot of time you might have considerably more leisure the rest of your life. And over time, that balances out depending
Yeah,
on what you do. So
absolutely. Yeah, no,
you're not doing it for
a-
your full career.
absolutely. And I think that is, I, because this podcast caters mostly to people in those industries, I've been out of that industry for 10 years now. And so, like, it was, we're just meeting for the first time, but just give you the TLDR that my listeners have already heard. But like, I didn't make any money for a couple of years because I didn't know how to take my existing finance skills and do like, I couldn't have seen myself becoming a fractional investor, a fractional banker, fractional IR, investor relations person, like kind of the skills that I had, and I was kind of over it. And so, but at the same time, like, there's this thing called the internet. Like, oh my God, like, you could, like, at first I was making money through Patreon, then I was making money through coaching. Then I did some like info products. And so, in some ways, like, I do feel like I am, yeah, while I'm not like, you know, doing the same thing on less hours, I think I've adopted the principles that you have put forth, which is like I need to make this amount of money, and I have these amounts of skills, and then there's this thing called the internet as like this fat layer that sits between like what I need to make and what my skills are, and then like
Yeah.
it's it's amazing. Like, and I'm actually surprised. I think most people, and I want to get to this point later, but I think most people in these kind of, let's call them giant air quotes, high achieving industries really struggle to make that because there's no map. There's like, there is a high degree of uncertainty. There's a loss of identity of like being, a master of the universe and then like some 2-bit blogger that like no one's heard about. And then the healthcare question that kind of looms over everything. So there wasn't a question there, just a repeating. And it seems like you have created that type of world for yourself as well.
I think yes, and I think there is still a prestige to some of those roles, but I also think that's shifting, and I do think prestige now is coming for the internet world. I mean, how often do you hear somebody described as a founder and podcaster?
Hmm.
Like that is like a kind of high prestige job now,
Yeah.
like to say you're
Yeah.
a podcaster.
Yeah. No,
And
it's,
especially if you've achieved some level of success with it. And everybody
hmm,
can see your success because they can see how much followers you have.
yeah.
And those previously, prestige jobs, we're not gonna need as much. I mean, I don't have an investor, I have Betterment, which automatically, balances my investments and reinvests
Hmm.
my dividends for me in the exact, qualifications that I need, and I don't have a lawyer. I use AI platforms that develop the contracts that I need and help me with whatever I need to set up my business. I use Stripe to handle a lot of my business stuff. So I think that how prestigious is it going to be in these roles that may become kind of legacy over time
Yeah.
that we can all kind of automate away? And instead, you're going to want to do something more human centric, and it's going to be more prestigious for you to be like, I have this to contribute to the world and you can
Hmm.
participate in it. So,
Yeah, I think I think it's fine. And I'll even observe, having been out 10 years, when I left, and I still have, I very much chase prestige in kind of its own flavor, du jour or de zeitgeist, but of the zeitgeist. But when I left, I thought it was, so this was 10 years ago. It was still in kind of like the early days of Facebook. Facebook had just bought Instagram to just like situate us temporally. And people still wanted to, it was still that like, I'm VC backed money. That was the prestigious route. And I was like, well, I'm going to leave this prestigious route of Wall Street to go down this other prestigious route of VC backed founder. And then I very quickly was like, that's not what I want. And I wanted to do a lifestyle business because this was before the creator economy was even a thing. And it was funny because people really, 10 years ago, people really were very dismissive about lifestyle businesses. It was basically for the people that couldn't cut it as entrepreneurs.
right.
Like, oh, you can't like start the next Facebook. Or were you going to like start a laundromat? It was kind of like there was no like nothing in between. You
Yeah.
went from Facebook to laundromat, and it was a very dismissive. And then the creator economy, I don't know, in the past 5-7 years, I don't know exactly when, kind of slowly started to eke in, and then lifestyle business went from like, oh, this like kind of dismissive term to like, oh, like this is the dream life, nomading, surfing, no meetings, all of that. So it's pretty wild to see that over that 10-year period. I'm curious, like, have you seen, like, if you expand the window of whether it's prestige or even like the categories of jobs, what's changed in your research, your experience?
I mean, I know we've even seen this with writers. I write a Substack on the Substack platform, and this is a platform that's relatively new. I think it's 7 years old or something. And 3, 4 years ago, if you said you were writing a Substack newsletter, that meant you were a hobbyist. The real writers were writing for the New York Times and all this
Mhm.
prestige media. And now we are seeing that completely shift. I mean, how many times have I read now a New York Times article, an Economist article, an Atlantic article where they're literally quoting a Substack writer,
Mhm.
because these big media publications let all of their writers go because they're too
Mhm.
expensive, and then those writers go start their own platforms. And everyone's like, I'm gonna go follow that writer. That's what I was interested in.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, sure, like, well, how did I start out this conversation? Here's all the platforms I've written for, here's all the magazines I've written for. There's still some kind of prestige in that, but I would actually argue that it's more prestigious now for me to be like, I write the Elysian, an independent newsletter that's in the top 5% of newsletters on the Substack platform,
Mhm.
and has this big following and has this big community. And that's maybe more prestigious now. And to be clear, I still have a lot of ambition.
Mhm.
I'm not gonna like, but I don't think my ambition is well served trying to become a New York Times journalist. I think my ambition is better served being like, I'm gonna have 1 million subscribers for my newsletter.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that will be its own media empire, if you will.
So if we go back to this question of the 40-hour work week, I forget, was it Mill? You would know this. Someone said, like 200 years ago, it's like in 200 years, because of technology, we're going to work like 10 hours a week and the rest of our time will be leisure. And so I was at Mill. You might, I don't know if you remember. It's
Um,
like one of those.
Maybe John Maynard Keynes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Maybe. Basically, the point was like pre-industrial revolution. They're like, in 100 years, no one will ever work again, right? And I feel
Yeah.
like, and you look back now, and again, there's this bifurcation, admittedly, of people who are kind of free agents, independent, and then people working for the behemoths. But there's still, it feels like every time technology gives us the ability to like free up work, like Zoom and things like that, we just end up substituting leisure with more work.
Yes. Okay, two things there. First, we actually do have more leisure than we've ever had. And I think everybody focuses on the 40-hour work week as proof that we haven't had a change since the
Mm.
1930s. But that is to completely leave out that now we have these like 25-year retirement periods,
Uh,
unlimited vacation days, full weekends. Oh, some places have a week off for Christmas. That we have all of this leisure time that's been added into our lives, so that if you actually like net averaged out how much we work a week for the entire extent of our life. Oh, we
uh,
start work later because we don't start work now. Sorry.
okay.
We don't start work now until we're 22 and out of college, whereas we used to start work
Mm,
when we were 14. So like if you actually look at our lifespan and averaged out how much of our life we spent working in the 1930s compared to now, it's like insanely, insanely
oh,
less.
wow. Like
And I
percentage
can
of
show you.
hours, percentage of our
Yes.
life worked.
Yeah, exactly. Percentage of our life worked
Uh,
is like extremely, extremely less. We have like so much leisure time. And a lot of that is
that's
paid for by the
wild.
government in the form of social security, public education that's providing
Mm,
education for schools. So
fascinating.
the first thing is yes, we already do have the leisure time that John Maynard Keynes once predicted we would have in the 1930s. It just doesn't look the way we thought it would.
Got it. Interesting. And is that not, that's not just longevity that we're like living longer? I mean, I guess you have to factor that in as well,
Part
right?
of it is longevity, but also there's also a lot of uh, just the fact that we now fund Social Security, like that wasn't a
Yeah.
thing, that wasn't a thing that we did.
Wow.
And workers' comp and things like that, where people used to, if they were like maimed on the job, not be able to return to work, and then we're kind of screwed. So we've kind of created these systems where, and then we've made companies safer, so now that doesn't happen, so people can live longer and enjoy their lives more. And then the really interesting thing is, when people started having more leisure time after the 1930s, they started spending more money because they wanted to go on vacations, and they had the time to go on vacation. Or like before, cars were not something everybody had, and then you're like, okay, well now I want a car so I can go drive to some place, which means I need gas, which means I'm going to get a hotel. So we started spending money on all of these leisure activities, which grew our economy so insanely much.
Wow.
So it ended up creating more work for everyone at the same time that everyone was working less. Really just kind of interesting trajectory. So that's one part of it. The second part of it is when we stop working, do we have something else we need to work on? And the answer is yes, of course we do, because nobody wants to just sit there idle.
Mhm.
And how cool is it now that there's the opportunity for so many things that we might consider leisure that we could actually make money doing it.
Mm.
My job is totally leisure. I
Yeah,
mean, I used to
same.
do this kind of writing as a side hobby of my job. Like, this was something I did for my personal passion and interest. And then I took it full time. And how incredible is that? Like, I know I did a story once where I interviewed a bunch of Etsy artisans, and there's like candle makers and stuff that they were like, "Oh yeah, I used to work a tech job and then I started a candle company on the side on Etsy as a passion project and now it's my full-time business." And I see
Mhm.
that only increasing because nobody wants to just be like, "I'm going to do nothing." But now it's like the alternative isn't I'm going to stay home baking sourdough by myself or me and my family. It's like, well, this is actually really fun. I'm going to make it for my friends too and my family members, and maybe it's becoming a business now. It's like almost a return of the artisan class, only everything's not artisanal, it's also creative, and there's so much more creativity now than there ever has been. Writers, podcasters, videographers, filmmakers, anybody can be any of those things,
Mhm.
and that could be leisure and or work.
Yeah. Wow. I love I have so many places to go off of the 2, 3 points you just made. But what comes to mind, and you're a futurist, and you think about these, and you have created this life for yourself that integrates all these things beautifully. It's very relatable to me. And, like today's, we're changing administrations, and this is not to get political at all, but the mood in the United States is like this country's a wreck. Everyone's getting squeezed at all angles. There's no healthcare, people, inflation, all like there's such a negative sentiment. Again, I don't know how accurate it is, but there's a prevailing sentiment. And how do you reconcile? And you take like the CEO of United Healthcare was recently shot, and so you take healthcare, you take housing, you take childcare, you take inflation, you take the price of groceries. Um, you take political divisions, the list goes on and on. And it seems like a large part of this country is kind of believes that is the state of the world. And then there's like maybe my words like kind of techno optimists, knowledge workers, independent workers that are like, this is amazing. Like the work that it used to take me 10 hours takes me 2 hours, and like I can go make sourdough bread with the remaining 8 hours and like even get paid for that. Is there a reconciliation that needs to happen, or is it just like two tracks of people just moving in two different directions? I know that's a big question, but
I think, okay, my personal take on the current moment is that everything is a mess, and that's a perfect opportunity for us to slide in and organize it. Because okay, so let's just take an example and imagine that Trump decides to get rid of the Department of Education federally, and that's gone. Okay, well now what happens? All of the states have to manage education, and they already do mostly. So they're like, okay, well, we need more funding. We need to figure out what an ideal education could look like. We don't have a curriculum anymore. We have to figure out like what an ideal curriculum could be. And suddenly, everything is a startup basically, because
mhm,
we have to start from scratch and rebuild something. And this is maybe an opportunity, for example. For Democrats who are like, I've always wanted a better education system. Our education sucks. Everybody knows our education system sucks. Let me come up with something better and like propose this to my state. And this is something that's been happening forever and ever and ever. We have these kind of thinkers and idealists who were like, I have this idea for a better society, and then boom, their entire civilization collapses, and there's like, well, now we have to build a better society, so we might as well use some of these ideas we came up with. And here we can think of, Thomas More, who literally wrote Utopia and imagined this kind of idealist world without poverty or class. But he actually worked at a state as a statesman, and he actually reformed the justice system of his time when the king was doing all this crazy stuff. And he was like, "Oh, actually, I have some ideas for how we can fix this."
Mm,
And the same was true of Francis Bacon, who wrote The New Atlantis and imagined this fantasy world where universities kind of took the place of government and scientific advancement was like the future. And then when we kind of had the opportunity to create some of these educational institutions, we put that into place. We can think of Edward Bellamy and William Morris, who both imagined an end to capitalism. And maybe their ideas didn't end up coming into pass, but we did bring some of their proposed ideas into fruition. For example, the credit card, that was Edward Bellamy. William Morris fathered the arts and crafts movement and established the design moment, kind of a forebear to Etsy. Um, so
mm,
we kind of have all these thinkers who come up with these incredible ideas that might seem sci-fi or futuristic, and totally idealistic and unattainable. But then we also have these collapsing structures where we're like, the banks aren't working, the education system's not working. What are we going to do instead? And this is the opportunity for those ideas to be like, oh, actually, I have an idea. Let's create this instead, and that could become the new norm. I mean, you think
mm,
about how SpaceX took over for NASA, and now the government uses SpaceX. so
yeah.
so we can do that for literally everything. We can create a new education system. We can create a new anything system, and that can be the
Mhm.
new norm.
Am I hearing you correctly? Like maybe taking crypto as an example, where you know, irrespective of your opinion on Bitcoin, just it's a thing. It's an
Yeah,
industry, people believe in it. Again, this is agnostic to whether you and I believe in it or not.
right.
And then you have a company like Coinbase, which hires, I don't know, like 2,000 people, right? Publicly traded company. Like, and so I guess what I hear you say is like there was this opportunity for like another currency,
Yep.
and a bunch of, I guess, like really like idealists kind of came up with it. Maybe they probably didn't even think it would have the success that it ended up having. And then from that created more like, even if you're not a crypto entrepreneur, like Coinbase has, a head of marketing and, like a janitor, like a head of
Yeah.
ops, right? And so in the kind of chaos, or maybe not chaos, but the reshuffling, then these entrepreneurial pockets open up, and you can either be the entrepreneur that like jumps in and like, this is my
Yes.
thing, or you can support that entrepreneur, that vision. And most people, I don't think most people want to be entrepreneurs. Like they're very happy with like, this is here's a series of tasks to do, here's what you're going to get paid to do, and here are the boundaries of when we need you and when you don't. Is that a fair interpretation of, or
Yes. I mean, what's going to happen with crypto? Everybody had the dream of crypto as a currency, but it's instead been used as an investment instead because it's too volatile, too complex to use for the average user. However, imagine now that the crypto is starting to become more mainstream, it starts to become used by more people. It's easier to use because of things like Coinbase. Well, now imagine the US currency just crashes and tanks. What's everyone going to do? I'd rather have crypto. I'm going to start using crypto to buy my groceries instead of the US dollar because the US dollar has no has no value.
Mhm.
That's obviously an extreme example that's maybe unlikely to come to pass, or maybe it will. We never know if anything could happen. Um, but the dream of the idea of cryptocurrency as a currency that could be used in place of government currency when governments fail, is an interesting one and not really happening, but could if those dire situations come about.
Mhm. Yeah.
The same thing can happen with, um, for example, you said not everybody wants to become an entrepreneur, but they do when the circumstances cause it. For example, when all the schools closed during pandemic, there was suddenly all of these teachers saying, "I'm going to start a pod school in my
Yeah.
neighborhood," where they would have 6 kids come over to their house and they would teach them, or they would go over to somebody's house and teach a pod of like 5 people. These are not entrepreneurs, but like 5 families are
Yeah.
paying a teacher to teach their kids because there is no school. So
Mhm.
I think that the more the systems that don't work crash, the more that we do step in to create new ones, even if we don't think of ourselves as entrepreneurs.
Yeah. That's fantastic point. I definitely hadn't thought about it that way. And so where does that, I guess one of the big kind of elephants in the room is AI in this all. And again, full disclosure, like I am not one of those AI like singularity people. I'm like, I use it. We were speaking before. It saves me 2 to 3 hours of work a day, which is interesting because it's like it's funny because I could take those extra 2 to 3 hours and like go try to make more money. But instead I was like, I'm gonna learn how to make music like purely as a hobby. And I'm like, wait a minute, like my revenue has not changed. My work hours has gone down. And then with that extra hours, I've like invested in more leisure. And so like, it's
Yep.
like a very like kind of tight ring system. I guess the question of like AI at a much larger scale, if we're talking about 40 to 20-hour work weeks, you might have been making those arguments before, ChatGPT, was released to the public. Do you have a sense of like how that plays out if, so many knowledge worker type tasks, graphic design, music making, editing, journalism, copywriting are, effectively commoditized and close to free?
I mean, I think this is I think it's going to give us more leisure hours, but not in the way that we think.
Mm,
Um, because it's not like, "Oh, I'm gonna automate all of my work and now I'm gonna work 20 hours a week." It's like you said, it's I'm not gonna keep writing 1 article a week and then but making that take only 2 hours of my day. I love writing, I wanna spend more time
mhm,
doing it. So, instead of writing 1 article a week, now I might be able to write 3 articles a week or 5
mhm,
articles a week because my research is easier to get to. I can automate the pictures that are gonna go with my newsletter. I can have ChatGPT write my headlines for me. I can, look up all of my sources and get quotes that I need by using these various AI tools. So now a project that might have taken me 40 hours could take me 6, and I'm still researching, I'm still reading, I'm still writing, I'm still using my time reading and writing,
mhm,
but and I might be spending the same amount of time doing that, but I'm producing way more. Um, and theoretically, I could have more leisure time if I wanted to, but I don't think everybody necessarily just wants to work 2 hours a day and not do anything else for the rest of their day.
mhm,
They wanna do something. And even in my life, like, I'm currently traveling the world and doing this kind of fun midlife gap year, digital nomad style. I asked ChatGPT, I want to spend 2 months in Southeast Asia. Write me in an itinerary for Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia. I want to spend at least 5 days in each place. I want to emphasize Buddhist history and humanism. Show me where the unique companies are. And I want to visit places that don't have malaria, whatever I want. And it makes me
mhm.
a full itinerary in a second,
Yeah.
with all the dates installed and all the places I should visit and all the places I should stay. And what normally would have taken me hours and hours and hours of travel research to try to plan a trip is now automated, and I can just go visit all those places.
Mhm,
So, in our work and in our personal life, we can automate more things, but we're still going to spend our time doing things.
mhm. Well, so how does that play out have you thought about how it plays out for larger corporations? So, let's say a software engineer used to spend 8 hours, presumably 8 hours, which, we were saying it might have been 4 or 2, and, it spits out code in like, 10 seconds. Is that like, do you know if that software engineer becomes obsolete or if they get tasked with like a different kind of work on top of that 10 seconds of code, or they go out? Like, I'm struggling to like visualize how that plays out let's say software engineering gets completely commoditized?
I mean, the software engineer is still needed to write and design, like design and then write the code. But they can automate most of it, most of the code writing, and then just edit it and check it. So in that scenario, they might be able to, for example, produce a video game in like a year instead of 5 to 10.
Yeah.
And so I just think those things are still going to be needed, but all of those jobs are going to use AI to create. I mean, here's a good example. We used to film movies where the actors would be standing in an actual physical location that the movie takes place. They would be wearing full costumes that were, of the period of time, designed and sewed. They would have this elaborate set. And then what happens, CGI comes and can create these really, really elaborate backgrounds. You can just picture Avatar and all of the Marvel movies,
Yeah.
every action film ever made, Wicked. I have never seen such cool world building in a film,
Yeah.
the way that you just see Munchkin Land and the Emerald City and all of these amazing, the Lord of the Rings on Amazon. Oh my God, I could just see Numenor brought to life, or all these like crazy
Mhm.
cities. That was insane. How are they doing that? Did the movie director and writers and actors, are they suddenly spending way, way, way less time doing it because they can now generate a background using technology? No.
Mhm. Yeah.
They're still working really hard to put together a really awesome film, but that
Mhm.
film got way better in quality,
Yeah.
could do way more with that same period of time, could create something way more elaborate with people flying on brooms and everything. So it's not like we just stopped working and had AI
Yeah.
generate a movie for us. We
Mhm.
just made better movies.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's fascinating. And presumably in that, I also hear like new jobs get created, like the CGI engineer, the CGI artist. I don't know the terminology of the CGI world. Some roles get eliminated, like the extras that were standing around, to paint the scenario, maybe some of the set designers. And so,
But you gain
what?
animators and
Yeah, yeah, no,
engineers, software engineers, and there's so many other jobs involved in it. Like, yeah, a Disney movie used to be somebody drawing each cartoon cell by cell
yeah,
by hand. But now think about how Moana looks, and
we still
we
have Disney
changed it.
movies.
We still have Disney movies, and they still have lots and lots of people working on them. Tons
Yeah,
and
and
tons
they're
of
all
people.
they're good. Yeah,
They're
that's
so good.
and so if you think about like what are the skills that someone needs, like the meta skills, not like software engineering and so on. Forget AI. Say kind of everything we've inclusive of AI, but talk, covering everything that we've covered so far in this episode. Like what do like someone's graduating college. I get this often. You probably get it too. Someone's either entering college or graduating college or about to, and they're like, the world is changing. It's so uncertain. Okay, you guys have blazed a path for yourselves. Like, if you were in my shoes, like, what are some of the skills, the meta skills that you would focus on, industries? Like, what advice do you give that person?
I mean, honestly, it's like the same advice from when we went to college. It's like you can get a major in anything you want, but afterwards, that job is going to significantly change over the next 50 years of your life, and you're going to have to learn on the go and on the job
Mm,
because it's going to be different.
yeah,
I mean, how many of our master's degrees or bachelor's degrees are totally obsolete now?
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, the advice is not the same. So I kind of feel like it doesn't matter. Like, obviously, any kind of technical skills are really helpful if you have any interest in software engineering or any kind of or regular engineering and any infrastructure jobs. Like, all of those will always remain, but they're going to change a lot over
yeah.
time.
Mhm. So it's
So,
kind of like
and
the ability to learn, like
yeah,
learn and
the
adapt.
ability to
Which, yeah,
learn and constantly adapt.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's funny. You're a friend of mine. You may know him as another Substack blogger, Nat Eliason. He
Okay.
he's teaching a course on how to use, this is kind of like the Bitcoin Coinbase example we use, but he's teaching a course on how to use Cursor, which is like a code generation AI, like chat GPT thing, like he basically says like anyone, there's the promise that anyone can become a coder thanks to ChatGPT. Well, guess what? I tried and it didn't work. Like there's
Yeah.
so much friction in between like the environments, the logins, the, like where you save the code. Like it's not that easy to the point earlier. It's not like you just wave a magic wand and software engineering just disappears. And so he's teaching this course on, he's like, you can create like, I'll teach you how to create your own type form, which is like a served form software, Google Forms type thing. You can do that without code. But his promise was like, most of you have probably tried to use ChatGPT to code, but you couldn't actually ship something because of, there's this whole,
Right.
maybe it's not a meta skill, but this whole like ancillary skill set, like around the actual code to bring something to life. And so, here I am at 45 years old. I'm not like trying to make money off of this, but I
Right.
recognize that like if someone like me, a writer, can whip up a software app relatively cheaply and like there's like endless possibility for me.
Yes.
And so I'm
Yes.
like, this is the skill that I want to learn. And I've seen the power of AI. So I'm like, I don't doubt that AI can become good at coding. I don't know if I can, train the dragon. Um, and
Right.
so I guess that is like that's an extension or a manifestation of this, like, and funny enough, ironically, I was a computer science major in 2001 where we used like C, the programming language, which I don't even think anyone uses C anymore. So like all that coding language is just completely like in the garbage.
Right. Right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think AI will make all of our lives easier, but will still nobody is going to watch a movie or read a book or listen to a podcast that is just 100% AI generated.
Mm,
Like
yeah.
there is still a market. Like people still want to know what you in particular
Mm,
think about something.
mhm.
People still want to like watch a movie that like somebody created. If they use tools that help them create it, all the better. But it's not
Yeah.
like it's just going to be officially designed by a robot.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to circle back to something that you said earlier about when we were talking about the work week, the amount of free time that we have over time. And you said something that was like, well, we had all this free time, and then we started spending money to we spent money during that free time, which created like this whole set of this whole other economies. And you have that when one of your posts that we'll link below, you have this example of, you call it the cautionary tale of consumption, where you have these great quotes like, we could work a 20-hour work week and go for a run outside. Instead, we work 40 hours a week so we could pay for our Peloton subscriptions. We could work a 20-hour work week and cook our own meals. Instead, we work a 40-hour work week and get takeout. And it's funny because one of the people I'm coaching right now, they basically took a gigantic pay cut to do kind of some of the stuff that we've been talking about. And then there's like, wait a minute, I don't need childcare anymore because I can go pick up my child after school and like I can cook. And so it was like, yeah, I'm taking a pay cut, and but with that pay cut, there's all this like spending that no longer needs to happen. And it seems kind of obvious, but I feel like a lot of people don't recognize this. I'll share really quickly. We had Carrie's son, who was an executive assistant for like a large hedge fund manager, and he worked her to death, like 16, 18 hours. He would send her, I think it's like 500 emails a day, and he expected her to acknowledge receipt of each one. And she would burn out, and she like got hurt working out because she was so tired. And then he would like give her, he's like, oh, you're burnt out, here's like $1,000 spa credit to the Mandarin Oriental in New York, or here is like meal prep service or whatever. And it was just like, it was so crazy because he had basically bought all of her time, and then he was like giving her time back in like basically like spa credits. And I'm like, what a
Yeah.
fucking insane. I mean, she laughed, so knows it too. But I feel like in a lot of these jobs, people are doing a version of that.
Yep.
And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and like what happened? Where did we go wrong?
And one of my favorite articles is by Ray Katz. It's called "If You Were Rich,
Yes,
Would You
I
Still
found
Fold
that
Laundry?"
article through your blog.
Yeah,
So I'm
it's
sorry, say
so
that again because I
good.
spoke over to you. Say the title
Ray
again.
Katz's "If You Were Rich, Would You Still Fold Laundry?" And the whole premise of it is, I think she used to be a McKinsey consultant, and the boss was like, "Here's what you do: you automate all the other parts of your life. You ship out your laundry, you hire childcare, you hire a personal chef, or you order in every night for dinner. You can just literally automate your whole personal life so that you can work." And she was like, "Well, what if I want to like not work as much so I can enjoy my personal life and make dinner by hand or fold my own laundry or watch my own kids?" Um, and I think that that is something I think that's something that honestly every person has to decide for themselves, because
Mhm.
there's some whenever people like get upset about something else being automated, there's always the rehash of like, but wouldn't we rather do that by hand? And I'm like, well, okay, we invented washing machines and dishwashers. You can still wash your dishes by hand if you want. You can still wash your clothes by hand if you want, but you could also choose to save time, do those both, have those both done quickly, and go do something else. So every single one of us can decide what are the things we want to still do analog and what are the things that we want to kind of automate away. And I think that where that gets interesting with work is when we would rather automate away our job so that we can enjoy more analog time in our leisure. And I think
Mhm.
that people are doing that either secretly through their salary job, not so secretly by taking a pay cut and an hourly cut and working a kind of more part-time job, taking fractional work where they work for a bunch of different companies for less hours. But whatever that is, I think that that's just going to continue. We will keep automating every part of our lives as we can, but we'll still have to decide what we want to actually do.
Yeah. I wonder too, kind of as I try to like harmonize or distill all of the threads that we have covered in our conversation, one thing that really strikes me is it's like, do you know what you want? Right. Um, and it almost feels like that is, because you talked about like you love the work that you do. So if you had more free time, you would just do more of that work because it's not a burden to you. And some would be like, "Oh, well, she's just lucky. She's in a world where she does a job that is, that she's passionate about." Um, but I would suspect that I mean, you had to crawl through, different machinations of your career. I did a wholesale shift and like basically like burned all the ships and be like, okay, what do I actually care about in this? If in these elements of consumerism, it's like, wait, it's like how much of this is like mimetic behavior? It's like, oh, everyone has a Peloton, so I should be riding a Peloton. Where it's like shameful to like still be a jogger or whatever. Um, like I feel like like so much of what we've discussed gets easier if you like truly understand yourself and like your desires and your limitations and your insecurities. I don't know. Am I extrapolating like a step too far here?
I mean, not really. But I think it's normal. I mean, the idea that you can decide what your college major is even all like people have to make that choice, but they do make that choice because they try to come up with something that is most aligned with what they want to do and will make money. And they can have that choice because there are so many different varieties of jobs available. It's not like it used to be 90% of jobs were agricultural. Now 1% of
Mhm.
jobs are agriculture, and we have all these other options.
Yeah.
And so it might not be like, oh, I'm working my passion project, but you might do, yeah, it might actually, now you have time to work on your passion project on the side, and your work is still way more aligned to your interests than it could ever have been in the past.
Mhm.
So I think, yes, we do have to design our lives in some way, but we already have to do that just by nature of being part of the workforce and having free
Mhm.
time.
Yeah, got it. So I guess if we're having this conversation in 10 years, like, how would we be most surprised by what's happening in like, let's like pick a period that's like short enough that we'll still be, touch wood, active participants in the economy, but long enough that, like 10 years ago, Instagram barely existed. So, there's still like seismic change. Like, well, I don't know. I'm kind of asking you to predict the future here in some regards, but
I think so long as we have more leisure time, then we will spend more leisure time and thus more of our money on things that are personally interesting to us. And that will mean that there are more creatives. Because if you can think about something like Webtoon or Wattpad, for example, where you have all of these people following like a niche web comic or a
mm,
serial novel by some hobbyist, and they're following them in real time and paying them via Patreon. And they're like, yes, I want the next chapter of this web comic so much.
mm,
Like we would that is such a weird job. Like nobody in the past ever was like making money from web comics. But
mhm,
because we have so much leisure time that people are one writing and drawing them and two reading them, then we have a web comic person that's how they're
mhm,
making their money. That doesn't mean everybody in the world who's a webcomic will be able to make money doing it, but it means that there will be more people having those unique creative jobs.
mm,
Whether that's creative job is on the side of their work or is their work is will always be shifting. Whether it's because our work week is 20 hours a week or 40 hours a week and we're spending our other hours doing it, that will all be up for debate. Those things will all
mhm,
shift. But like regardless, I think as we make more money from our jobs, have more leisure time, we will spend more of that leisure on creative pursuits and we will thus create more creative opportunities. And you can already see this. Like, I don't know about you, but if I look at my budget every month, what am I spending it on? I'm not actually spending it on buying a lot of things, like
mhm.
things that I can actually
Yeah.
buy in my home. I but I have so many Substack subscriptions. I have like a
Mhm.
Spotify subscription. Actually, I have Apple Music now, it's better. And I pay for so many subscriptions, which are all
Yeah.
creative things that like
Mm,
how I spend my leisure time.
yeah.
And I think that's only going to continue. The more we spend our money and time on creative pursuits, the more that will be a thing.
Yeah. And I love that answer because I would say, if you had asked me 10 years ago, I would not have identified as a creative person. I'm like, I do spreadsheets, it's like I analyze stocks and this, and I was a computer science major. My parents were immigrants, like they didn't like encourage me. They didn't talk about encourage the arts at all. And here I am for the past 10 years, like I learned how to edit, I learned how to make music, I learned how to interview, I learned graphic design, I became a writer. I'm like, fuck, like I guess I was. I mean, it's only until like the past 2 or 3 years that I'm like, yeah, I'm a creative person. Like and
Yes.
now I'm like, I feel like I still I don't feel imposter syndrome saying it. But maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, I felt like, no, creatives are like, like the like Ernest Hemingway, like smokes a cigarette and in Sevilla and like gets drunk and writes during the day, or Kanye West with his like crazy, like bipolar, that just like it's like and it's
That was the
for me.
exception and now it's the rule.
I know, and for me, it's just like it is kind of yeah, I love hear you say it's like maybe it's like we're all creative, right? It's like
We are all
you
creative.
and I think that again, I don't hear that naturally. Like I have to make a few mental jumps to like believe that, but I hope that the people listening can be, it's like we are all creative, and this era that is upon us, buckle up because your creativity is going to thrive and be expanded in ways that you won't even be able to recognize. And so that's exciting.
Absolutely. It's very exciting. I mean, I think that that's the future. Even look at people who retire, that's what they do. My father-in-law quit or retired from a industrial job, and now he like refurbs bikes, like old classic bikes as for fun, and like does woodworking, and he takes bird photography. I mean, and now though he can share all those things with the internet. It's so
Yeah.
cool. So yeah, I think that's the future. We're all just gonna be creatives.
I love that. Well, Al, this has been so fascinating. You have such a grasp of these different topics and just like a this like real sincere optimism for kind of where we're all heading, which I share with you, but not everyone else, not everyone else does. So it's a treat to like get to be around it. So thank you so much.
Thanks for
Um,
having me.
can you tell us where we'll put all the links in the description, but where can people go learn about you, subscribe to your newsletter, follow you, all that good stuff?
My Substack is Elysian.press, so just like the Elysian fields in Greek mythology. Elysian.press, that's my only social media.
Awesome.
I've automated everything so I don't need social media in my life.
That's great. Kudos to you. See, another proof that you
There you
can
go.
build a thriving online business with one, I
Exactly.
mean, it's not even really social media. So
Right.
amazing.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you, Al.
you.